Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile. Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to the Thanksgiving edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Happy Thanksgiving to all. Hope you had a great time enjoying the turkey and all the fixings. Sit back for about a great hour of sports talk this evening. We've got a great panel for you tonight. Brett Martel, the Associated Press, Rod Walker, the Advocate, and we're going to talk a lot about what's going on with the Saints, the LSU coaching search. We'll get into the New Orleans Pelicans. We'll try to make time for the Bayou Classic, and maybe we'll talk a little baby cakes before it's all said and done. As always, let's turn to our panel now and find out a little bit about what they're involved in. Welcoming Rod Walker to our show for the first time. Rod, welcome to the show and welcome to the city. Really have been enjoying your columns with the Advocate. Tell the folks a little bit about what you got going on.
Well, thanks for having me on, first of all. Rod Walker, I've been in New Orleans since 2013, working for the New Orleans Advocate here, and I'm currently the sports columnist there. I cover a little bit of everything from high schools to the Pelicans to the Saints to the baby cakes,
yes.
as you mentioned. So a little bit of everything, and I'm enjoying the city. And just, again, thanks for having me on.
No, I appreciate it. Now, not originally from New Orleans. Where are you originally from?
Originally from Mississippi, born and raised there. Lived there my whole life, and
right.
Decided to make a change and try the Big Easy. And
right. Enjoying it?
I'm enjoying it. Never leaving.
There you go. That's what we love to hear. Right, Brett? We love to hear never leaving. You're a guy that's never going to leave, right?
Yeah, I married a girl that went to Sacred Heart.
It's over.
It's over.
It's over.
Yeah. So where in Mississippi again?
Yazoo City, Mississippi.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah.
And you're originally from?
Originally from Auburn, Maine.
Auburn, Maine, yeah.
Yeah, the lesser-known Auburn.
Yeah, there you go.
The non-SEC Auburn.
But you've been around quite a bit, and talk a little bit about the Associated Press, and tell us a little bit about what you guys are covering.
Yeah, actually, I moved here in '99 with AP. I was in news until around 2002 when the Hornets came from Charlotte, and I've been covering sports in this area ever since. And, just handling for the wire service, the Saints, Pelicans, LSU, and anything else of major national interest in sports. And,
of course, after Katrina, for a while there, you were kind of double dipping, right? Sports and news?
Yeah, immediately after Katrina, it's funny, I covered most of Saints training camp in 2005, and then I went back to news except for when they played their 4 home games in Baton Rouge, and then when the Hornets back then played a couple of games in March. I think they played a game in March against the Lakers in 2006.
Yeah.
Covered that. And then I basically went to sports full time when the Saints went back to training camp in Jackson, Mississippi in 2006.
Awesome.
Ever since then.
Well, both you guys do an excellent job, and thanks for being on the panel tonight. We'll start off with the LSU Tigers. We'll start with the coaching search. A lot of people believe that this coaching search will end by Monday or Tuesday with the naming of a new head coach. The administration, Joe Oliva, has had really since September to really kind of get their ducks in a row, and you would think after a rushed process last year and the inability to be able to pull a trigger on firing Les Miles and moving on to what was thought to be Jimbo Fisher, from the political aspects that we saw with the former governor chiming in, the new governor chiming in, to the situation with the F. King Alexander and not really wanting to go forward because of the public relations nightmare with what he perceived to be a school that was having financial difficulties, but yet were willing to buy out not one but two coaches, even though, again, we know the university was not coming up with that money. That was money that was outside money coming from boosters. He didn't want to deal with the PR nightmare. And, of course, at that point, they went with Les Miles 1 month into the season. He gets released. So they've had quite a bit of time to be able to figure out who they want, what the salary will be, what the philosophy of that coach will be. So I got to believe that it's going to be a fairly quick process unless some of these candidates backfire and are not willing to come to LSU. The name that everybody's talking about right now is Jimbo Fisher. I'll take you first, Rod. Rod, what are your thoughts about the way this was handled last year into this year? And then we'll kind of morph into some of the candidates that are involved in at least perceived to be involved in this particular search.
Well, I think, you mentioned, it would have been probably a catastrophe last year if they had pulled the trigger maybe. And, what's funny about all this is I know I was watching the game Saturday, and, if they get that 1 yard, we're not even having this conversation probably. I mean, it's probably Coach Ho's job to keep, but now it's a wide open field. I think Jimbo Fisher's the guy that everybody's sort of leaning towards, and, he has ties here, obviously, having coached with Saban and Les Miles. So I think he's the guy they're going to go after, and if they can get him, I think they will get him. Obviously, there's some other names out there, and Tom Herman's one that everybody's talking about, and Larry Fedora's a name that I like if these other guys slip through the crack, just because he sort of has ties to the areas, having coached at Southern Miss and now at North Carolina. So those are just some guys who are in the mix, I would think.
Brett, what can you add? Going back to the process, how this. You were intimately involved in watching what was going on up in Baton Rouge last year as this kind of rolled down, and of course to now Miles getting fired and having this length of time to really put together, really, I don't want to say a search committee, but to really kind of have a real good feel on what direction you wanted to go with the program.
Yeah, I think that it's been a lot smoother this year. And, last year I think that, because they started, I think it was 7-0 and were undefeated, I think, going into Alabama.
Yeah, I think it was.
And then, he had Les Miles had his first 3-game losing streak ever. The sentiment started to build really strong to get rid of him, but it was late in the year. It was happening fast. He had such a record of success before that. It was very, I think, difficult to make a move at that time. Plus, he was just very popular because he was a family man and the values he represents and everything. But they knew that early this year, if he faltered, they had to strike while the iron was hot. So they did. And not only did they give themselves time to kind of check who would be interested in coming and who would be available, but they wound up, I think, with a very charismatic and popular fallback in Ed Orgeron. Some of the people that I've spoken to even believe that if they had beaten Florida, especially if they had beaten them convincingly, then they might have been ready to make an announcement like after the game or this week or something like that. But the loss kind of put that on hold, and so now we're in a situation where I think the people who are pushing for Jimbo Fisher, if they can get him, kind of might have more pull. But the key is whether Florida State's really going to let him go, and how strongly he wants to come to Baton Rouge. But Fisher has the best resume. Right? I mean, Tom Herman might end up being a better coach in the long run, but Fisher has the best resume now. He has connections to Baton Rouge and LSU, and he's got a background with quarterbacks.
Yes.
Those are all things that LSU would love to have.
Right.
So I could easily see him being the top choice if they can't get him, and if Herman goes to Texas, as people think, then it becomes wide open. I think that's an opening for Ed Orgeron again, especially if they go into Texas A&M and do well.
What I think is interesting about this particular search, especially because Ed Orgeron has done such a nice job in keeping this team together. Obviously, last week really hurt him, as you mentioned, Rod, in not winning that game. But the people who are going to make this decision, the people who are going to finance this decision, they're not galvanized behind one individual now. You've got some factions that are real heavy for Ed Orgeron and would like to see him get the job. You got some factions out there that want to see Jimbo Fisher get the job. It's been rumored that Oliva's guy is Jimbo Fisher, but again, that's just rumor at this point. So, even got some out there that would like to see Tom Herman be the next head coach. So you got a lot of powerful people pulling in different directions now, and with the common denominator meaning that these are the individuals that are going to ante up the money, not only to be able to buy out a coach, but to be able to have a lucrative contract for the next coach that comes in.
Yeah, and I know Jimbo, he has a $5 million buyout on his contract, and that's going to be the thing. I mean, you got all these different people wanting different things. Even the players themselves, talking to them, of course, they want Coach O to stick around. And that's sort of normal with the players. They usually like the guy that they've been in the fire with the past couple of weeks. So it's going to be interesting to see, which one of these different factions actually wins out in this. And like we've talked about, I mean, they're trying to make a decision pretty soon, it seems like. So we'll have to see how it pans out.
Right. What are you hearing, Brett? Did you see that as well? I mean, I see that. I talk to different people all the time that are really plugged into the program. And it's amazing when I see how shattered this is. How many, and believe me, they are politicking for their particular candidate.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And but I think it'll all work itself out in the end. The good thing about, like I was saying before, Orgeron is that I think he's so popular on a personal level and so well connected. I think it would be easy if they're unable to get Fisher or Herman. What would be more controversial is maybe if they got a second-tier guy like Fedora or Holgerson or someone like that over Orgeron, because I think a lot of Orgeron supporters, and there are many of them, are not only saying, why can't we give one of our people a chance, they're also saying a real chance, not the last 7 games of this season when he comes in and he has to work with whatever he has.
And back against the wall,
Yeah. But let's give him a chance to run the program for a whole year and see how he does. And, I mean, if he's able, for example, to get a high-profile offensive coordinator who's known to work well with quarterbacks in the offseason, were he to be hired, and keep Dave Aranda, which is very important, I'm hearing, to the people at LSU, because let's face it, that defense is fantastic. I think they've given up now, 10 touchdowns this year, or 11 maybe, 11 touchdowns. And 11 touchdowns in 10 games, never more than 2 touchdowns in 1 game. And they want to keep him, and they know they could if they kept Orgeron.
Yes.
So, I think that's what's going to get tricky, is that, if they can't get either of the top 2 guys, then it's Orgeron, and then all of a sudden if they get rid of him and bring in someone from the outside, then you're going to have, I think, a little bit of a revolt among Louisiana people.
Would you agree with that, Ron?
Oh, I definitely agree with that. And another thing about Coach O, I mean, obviously his ties to the state and just his ability to recruit. I mean, you lose a lot if you lose him on that staff. So I mean, and you have to wonder if you don't know if he'll stay or not if he's not the head coach. That's going to be keep him around.
I had Jordy Collado on my radio show last week from ESPN Baton Rouge. On his radio show, he had Coach O on the program every week until he took the interim job at that point. They seem to be pretty plugged in over there with Coach O, and one of the things he mentioned was if Coach O was to get the job, one of the things that he has promised, I guess the powers that be is he would, if Lane Kiffin, the offensive coordinator at Alabama, does not get a head coaching job, that Kiffin would join him in Baton Rouge. He would keep Aranda, and of course he would continue his CEO-type oversight of the program. That's appetizing to a lot of people out there that are looking for an up-tempo offense, looking for someone that can cultivate and really kind of bring in the best of the best when it comes to quarterbacks out there as well.
Yeah, I know he's supposed to meet with Coach O. Supposed to meet with some of the higher ups, this weekend. I guess on maybe Friday after the game, and he's going to lay out his plan. If that's part of his plan, I think that has to be something that they strongly consider. I mean, because the offense has been the thing that most of the fans have been complaining about. If you can get Kiffin on that staff and keep what you have on defense, I mean that's a good selling point for any coach. Yeah.
Your thoughts? Have you heard that? Obviously, that would be appetizing, especially as a fallback position. If you can't get one of the first 2, if you're able to bring an Orgeron in and to have that dynamic offensive coordinator, and you're taking something from the Alabama staff as well, so you weaken them.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard how strong of a possibility Kiffin is specifically. I think there's a lot of moving parts there, but everybody knows that they are good friends. And that
Orgeron considered a mentor to Kiffin, from what I understand.
Yeah, and so I mean they've been together at other stops, Tennessee and USC. So I would not be shocked if all that played out. I love coaching. I love covering Coach Orgeron. I like covering Miles too.
And that the case with the media? Almost to a man, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's great in that regard. That doesn't make him a great football coach. And I try to be objective and say, well, in some ways, he really doesn't have the resume to take over such a plum job as LSU, which you would think is one of the top 5 jobs in the country or so. I mean, the revenues, the facilities, the fan base, the recruiting, proximity to great recruits, and the lack of another. It's not a binary flagship state, if you will.
Right.
It's not Auburn, Alabama. It's not Mississippi State. It's not Texas A&M. It's just LSU. So there's so many things going for this job. You'd think that it would have to be somebody who's been a head coach and really successful for a significant period of time, or someone like Tom Herman, who, he's probably best known for being the Ohio State offensive coordinator when they tore apart Alabama in the national semifinals and then beat Oregon. And then he goes to Houston, and just last week, I mean, they beat Louisville. They're winning all these games that teams like Houston aren't supposed to win.
Yes.
And he's a quarterback guy. And so, but if they can't get that, or someone like Jimbo, who has that resume of having won a national title, then you look at Coach Orgeron and you say, okay, well, he doesn't have the resume, but he has a lot of other intangibles, if you will,
yes,
that maybe make him a strong candidate.
They're much like what Rob was saying. First of all, he's one of the top defensive line coaches in the nation, bar none. You look at him from a recruiting prowess. The guy is a tireless recruiter, one of the best in the nation. He has inroads into Louisiana, obviously. He's beloved here in Louisiana. I got to believe that if he doesn't get the job, he probably is not going to stick around. He'll end up somewhere else, hopefully not at another SEC school. And then the other question, is maybe a mid-major for him to maybe be able to take that next step to a head coaching job at a big-time school. On the flip side, you've got a guy in Jimbo Fisher who has a great resume. He's won a national championship. He's learned at the knee of Nick Saban. If ultimately he is a guy that was to come to LSU, I think that a lot of the boosters are enticed by the fact that he doesn't have a fear of Nick Saban. That was a criticism of Les Miles. He kind of went into a little shell when he had to play against Saban. Fisher understands the politics of LSU, which is huge. When you talk about everything that surrounds that program, he understands the inner workings of the program. He knows the boosters. He knows the high school coaches here in Louisiana. And he's never stopped recruiting Louisiana. So he understands Louisiana recruiting as well. You throw the caveat out there that he's been a national recruiter with Florida State and also now has inroads into the Florida and Georgia. It makes him an enticing candidate if ultimately he is willing to be able to make the move from Florida State to LSU.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I think if you look at the whole list of candidates, I think Jimbo's definitely the one who has the most impressive resume, and I think he's the guy that you're going after, definitely, without a doubt. And if you can't get him, I mean, that's when you kind of start looking down the list. But I think he's definitely the guy at the top, and I think LSU is going to do whatever they have to do to try to make him, want to take this job.
Yeah, I agree. And it's been, again, it was written this week by Glenn Guilbeau of USA Today and Cadet News that it looks like his agent, Jimmy Sexton, is trying to raise the ante here. Remember that Florida does not have a income tax, something you have to deal with here in Louisiana. Been talked to kind of offset that, maybe with a housing allowance. If you go and look at his contract now, it's about $5.2 million a year, but there are incentives in that contract: winning the conference, getting to the Final Four, winning the national championship. That could escalate that contract to about $6.6 million. Right now, it is Harbaugh and Saban at $7 million as far as the two highest paid coaches in college football. And you would have to think that ultimately Sexton is shooting for right around that $7 million mark or just below that, right?
Because you can easily argue that Harbaugh hasn't won as many national championships as his client has. So, although that could change this year the way Michigan's been playing, but who knows. But anyway, yeah, the only thing I'll say about Fisher, in addition to what we've already said, is that I don't know, there's three things going on in Florida. One is that Florida's administration is arrogant to a fault because of some of the things they've said about predicting that he'll stay there. Or Jimbo has misled them about how much he wants to stay there. Or Jimbo has actually told them genuinely that he wants to stay there. Like one of those three things has happened, right? Because the president of Florida came out yesterday and said that we're not going to get in a bidding war for him because we won't have to, because he's going to be at Florida State. And they said, how do you know that? And he said, I know my coach. So when he comes out and says that on the record in the State House, you kind of feel like, unless someone's being misled, that Florida State's prepared to do what it takes to keep him in Tallahassee.
One of the things that LSU has going for it that maybe Florida State doesn't, and they tried to do this last year when there was the flirtation with Jimbo Fisher, is the ability to pay assistants. They gave some of their assistants, some of their top assistants, a little bit of a raise last year at Florida State after it was rumored that he would be coming to LSU. The checkbook is open for assistants at LSU. And that's one of the things, obviously, that is one of the differences between this program and Florida State.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think, you look at the resources, the facilities, and all that stuff, it definitely favors LSU. When I think about Jimbo, I think the only thing that could maybe be a concern is, maybe he doesn't want to. It's a lot easier to win a national title at Florida State than it is in the SEC.
Yes.
Just competing in the SEC West, because you still have to go through Alabama regardless. And, the road's a little easier where he is now. But other than that, and I don't think Jimbo's a guy who's, afraid of competition, so I don't think that'll be an issue. But that would be the only thing I would see that was like saying, you know what, maybe I'll just stay here.
Naysayers on the part of Fisher's resume say that he lost control of his program, that he's had off-the-field issues. Those that are in the Fisher's camp have come back to say, wait a minute, Saban had problems, Miles had problems with kids off the field. It's something you have to deal with in today's college football. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I do think that's pretty common. Even this summer we had a situation where the left tackle from Monroe was in a park, and I don't know why his name
Cam
is
Robinson.
Cam Robinson, yeah. And there was an arrest there, and the DA decided not to pursue it. But there's stuff coming up with major programs all the time. It's hard for a coach to there's like 100 kids. And they're kids.
Right. College kids.
Yeah.
Got away from home for the first time ever.
Yeah, and that stuff, anywhere where that hasn't happened, it's just because they haven't been caught. You know what I mean? Like they were lucky. So I wouldn't make a big deal out of that. But unless it's, kind of like a repetitive, constant thing where you end up with like really serious stuff like a Baylor, for example. That's a little different. But, a random kid getting in trouble, getting in a fight, getting whatever. All the best coaches have had that happen.
Yep, I would agree. Since the 2010 season, going to the start of this season, Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher have 62 wins. So they both are tied. We're tied at the beginning of the season for the most wins in college football since 2010, and that's also saying something if you're a Fisher supporter. I agree with you guys. If it's not Jimbo Fisher. And I don't think it's going to be Tom Herman, because I really believe he's going to be at the University of Texas. He's a Texas guy. Most Texas guys would love to be able to put that Longhorn cap on their head going forward. Other names have been mentioned. Mike Gundy out of Oklahoma State, which would be, kind of weird considering Miles came from Oklahoma State to LSU. Larry Fedora, as you had mentioned. James Franklin was just recently mentioned as well, the former Vanderbilt coach now with Penn State. But when you add all those guys up and you look at, the darling candidate that's out there right now, which is Tom Herman, nationally, he's the hot guy. And then, of course, Jimbo Fisher with his ties to Baton Rouge. I'm kind of with you guys. It's either Fisher or Orgeron for me. And it'll be interesting to see ultimately how they do this. If Fisher outprices himself or if there's a little bit of a hiccup, how quickly they turn to Coach O. But I'll ask you this, Rod. With that said, they were very, very undisciplined against Florida, okay? I felt like the altercation before the game really got Florida's juices going. You didn't have to kick the Gators while they were kind of down. They were injured. I thought that the Tigers played undisciplined football at times, turning the ball over, especially in the red zone, the blocked field goal. All that could be, you can't put it all on Coach O, but, he's the guy in charge. So there will be some that will be questioned. Big game, needed to win it. Outside of that Alabama game, you didn't have your team disciplined and ready to go. Allow these distractions to get to them. How big is this Texas A&M game now for him to win this game and maybe win it decisively to stay in the mix as that fallback guy? Oh,
I think it's a must-win. I think he has to win this one. And like I said, he's 1 yard away from probably having his job, and I think this would have been the one that you have to finish it off. So I think it's definitely a must-win. If you don't win this one, I think he's probably almost out of the conversation, if he doesn't win this one.
I think it depends somewhat how the game goes. I know that Orgeron supporters will say about the Florida game, it's hard to hold him accountable. Even his own players are saying this. When they have over 100 more yards than they do.
Yes.
When Florida's one touchdown, I mean, let's face it, the quarterback was on his own 2-yard line. He threw it up in the sidelines, right? I mean, it's kind of a prayer of a
right,
throw.
It was. But he went at the right corner.
Yeah, he did. And Dante Jackson got disoriented and wasn't able to break it up or tackle him. And you end up with the longest touchdown in the history of Tiger Stadium. I mean, that's how they lost that game, right? And then not to mention fumbling and a botched snap and then the last series, I mean, what do you say? But, you know, it's basically where you have a situation the majority of the game, defensively and offensively, LSU was outplaying them. And then you get in these little, you have these little critical plays where you got to execute and they don't. Is that on the coach or on the kids? That's a little harder to figure out because over the course of the game, if you look at the game holistically, he had them prepared to dominate Florida.
Yes.
Right? And then they just made huge, costly mistakes.
Fans will key in on the last series and how Miles-like it was with more of a conservative approach to trying to score there. You know, some will talk about clock management. I thought he managed the clock perfectly. You went down. It was the last play of the game, win or lose. Yeah. It was 4th down. You had nowhere else to go. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you, and I think a convincing win over the A&M sort of, you know, removes some of that talk. And, you know, fans kind of, you know, they remember the last thing they saw. And obviously the ones who don't want them will definitely go back to this Florida game. But, you know, if you can beat A&M convincingly on the road, I mean, I think some fans are looking at it and say, oh, maybe we should keep this guy around.
The conservative play calling toward the end. Now, that's on Ensminger. He's been the CEO. Yeah. It's not like you see Coach O on the sidelines. He doesn't have the mic down. The mic is up.
Coach O, all he was responsible there was for the clock, in my opinion.
Right.
I don't think anybody's putting that on Orgeron, frankly. I mean, he's a defensive line coach. He doesn't do the offense.
Yes.
He's doing the best he can with what he's got. You know, in terms of offensively, he's trying to let Ensminger coach him. And Ensminger's done a good job in spurts. He's done a great job, you know. But I think he decided to go to their strengths there. He thought their strength was running the ball. And, you know, we don't really know how Danny Etling handles a lot of these plays in practice where, you know, where they could have been maybe more creative. But, you know, they didn't have the option to do a screen pass to Fournette. Maybe they could have done something like that to Geis or kind of did a pass out of the wheel route or something, you know, something more creative.
Sure.
But I think that they just believed, and I understand why they believe it. I think they believed it was a layup, and they just missed 2 layups in a row.
Yeah.
You know, at the end.
A lot of, considering how injured Florida was, a lot of people believed that this would have been a blowout, and they kind of kept them in the game. Yeah. Guys, if the deal is not done by Monday or Tuesday, I got to believe the natives will start getting restless, and then people will start being able to question Oliva and his ability to be able to handle this process because he's had since September to be able to try to figure out what he wanted as a coach, what would it take to get that coach there, and ultimately to pull the trigger on that coach.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think the longer this thing plays out, I think to LSU's advantage, they have Coach O there. And I think he's sort of the guy that he's like the ace in your, you know, he's the guy that you can always have, you know, just waiting for this job. So I think the longer it goes on, it probably works in his favor. And, you know, he's still hanging around in the mix. But
yeah. Brett?
In many ways, Orgeron is the safest hire that Oliva can make because if it doesn't work out, everybody will kind of understand, well, at least he gave our guy a chance, a real chance, you know, and he could survive. I really think he could survive that. If he doesn't choose Coach O and chooses someone else and it blows up in his face. Yeah, right, somebody like that, and it doesn't work and it blows up in his face. And he hasn't had the best track record with hiring coaches either, especially basketball so far. So, you know, I mean, Oliva's strengths is recognizing leverage in negotiations and raising money and raising revenues. And I mean, you know, the revenue streams have skyrocketed since he's been there. He's enhanced the facilities dramatically, and that's going to be a great legacy for him. Coach hires so far are not a great legacy for him. So this is big, and if he's playing it politically, he might be inclined to pick the safest choice, at least for the short term, which would be Coach Orgeron, especially if the 2 obvious top choices don't pan out.
I asked this question to our panelists last week. If it is Coach O, do you give him the full-blown 5-year contract, or do you give him a 3-year contract because, you know, the unknown in terms of him being a head coach? Do you give him the 5-year contract with maybe just the minimum type of buyout? I mean, how do you work that out, in your opinion?
I don't know if you tie 5 years into him. I think you do have to be a little more cautious with this hire if you make him. I mean, just looking at his resume, I mean, he hadn't really proven himself as a head coach yet. So I think you have to be a little bit more cautious. And like I said, the key for him is going to be getting him an offensive guy. And if he can do that and you play it safe, and if it works out well, then you can extend it, and he's your man, and you made the right pick.
Yes.
Yeah. It just depends. That's Oliva's expertise. If they go with Orgeron, that's where he's going to be good, is figuring out that kind of contract. And it might be the cheapest thing, might be, like if you're thinking about it in terms of insurance or hedging, it might be the 5-year deal with the minimum buyout. You know what I mean? Because if you give him a short deal and he takes off like a rocket in that first year, all of a sudden you're looking at a massive extension.
No doubt, you are.
You know what I mean? So we'll see how that goes.
Guys, I believe it'll be Jimbo Fisher. I think they're going to introduce Jimbo Fisher early next week. Rod?
If I was betting on it, I think I'd lean towards Jimbo as well.
Yeah, he seems like the strongest candidate. My only hesitancy in agreeing with both of you guys is the things that Florida State's president has said on the record. I don't know. I'm hedging.
Okay, you're hedging.
I'm hedging. But I'm saying it's either I say Fisher 1 and Coach Orgeron 1A.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, definitely. I think Coach O's second. Yeah.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. It's the Thanksgiving edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Hope you and your family are enjoying a great Thanksgiving holiday. We're going to take a quick break. Rod Walker of The Advocate, Brett Martel of the Associated Press are our guests. We'll switch to the New Orleans Saints. We'll talk a little New Orleans Pelicans as we go forward. We hope to get also talk a little bit about the Bayou Classic, and we might even throw some baby cakes in there, just for the fun of it before the end of the night. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Don't go anywhere.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Amco Fence, locally owned and operated since 1976. Fully licensed and insured and a member of the BBB, Amco serves both residential and commercial customers. If you're looking to repair, replace, or install a fence for security or aesthetic reasons, Amco Fence supplies wooden, metal, chain link, vinyl, and ornamental or automatic gates. Amco aims to satisfy your fencing needs. Amco Fence, 504-468-9559 or AmcoFenceCompany.com.
TikTok Cafe, located on Causeway South at the I-10 in Metairie, is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Our menu offers breakfast dishes like our Western omelet made from scratch biscuits, grits, egg sunny side up, and lunch specials like our homemade cheeseburgers with a side of golden brown fries. Don't forget about our weekday lunch special and that every Tuesday is steak night. TikTok Cafe, open 24/7 at Causeway South at the I-10 in Metairie.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guest tonight, Rod Walker of The Advocate, Brett Martel of the Associated Press. We switched to Saints. Saints with a 23-20 loss to the Carolina Panthers after getting back to 500. They've kind of stumbled over the last couple games. Guys, we can point to special teams, but it's also self-inflicted wounds that has hurt this team all year long. I mean, you can maybe look at it and say this is a rebuilding team. When you turn the roster over as much as you have over the last 3 years, you've got to expect young players to make mistakes, and you're going to have that going forward. Although some of the mistakes have been made by the Hall of Fame quarterback, which again, happens when, he's going to try to win. He's going to try to throw in the tight windows. That happens. But special teams has been the greatest defender here. You've had blocked field goals, you have blocked extra points, and of course, with that. You've got the natives here in New Orleans, the fans really, really restless. Once again, talking about replacing McMahon at the special teams as a special teams coach. He brings in Kevin O'Day, whose expertise is supposedly the snap, hold, and kick on field goals and extra points. I just wonder, you got 6 games left. Lutz is a 3-step kicker. He's had a problem with trajectory being low since he got to New Orleans. You haven't had a situation where the offensive line, at first it was Teron Armstead who was trying to play injured on one leg. They kind of got overwhelmed by the New York Giants. You've had some breakdowns in terms of blocking. Obviously, it takes a little longer to get the ball off if you got a three-step kicker. And the special teams have been ordinary for many years. The Saints have pretty much given up on the return. I mean, it's touchback or fair catch for the Saints on special teams, and that's a huge aspect for a team that again is getting better on defense, has found its way on offense, but needs that third part to really be at least even with the opponent to be able to win games consistently. Let's start with the special teams first. Rod, you've covered this team now for a while. I mean, it's mind-boggling that it's got to this point, but I mean, they have had a turnover on the roster, they have had injuries, but you would think that the special teams would be a little further along at this point in the season.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, this team is 6-4, and I mean, their special teams blunders are. This team could very well be 6. The record could be reversed to be 6-4. Maybe even 7-3. So it just goes to show you how fine the line is in the NFL. I mean, you have to really be good in all phases of the game, and obviously Lutz gets a lot of the criticism because of the blocked kicks we've seen. But yeah, I mean, just some of the decision making they've made on special teams, on returns. Obviously, we all remember the play against the Falcons when Devontae Harris and Tommy Lee Lewis collided on the punt, and everything just kind of snowballed in that game. But special teams have, other than Thomas Morstead, I mean, special teams haven't played well at all this season.
Agreed.
I mean, it's been consistently bad every game.
Yes.
Yeah, the returns could get better. I mean, with Murphy, he was inactive for a lot of the year, and part of it was a numbers thing, and part of it was him being punished for ball security early on. But they didn't waive him because I think they figured that he's a young player. They drafted him. They have something invested in him, and they didn't want to give up on him too soon. And they also know that running back is an attrition-type position, and eventually someone's going to get hurt. And it'll be his time to maybe come back and prove that he's learned something. But I think he was trying too hard on that one kickoff that he tried to field before it went out of bounds at the 2.
Yes.
It was like a rookie mistake made by a second-year player, but maybe a player was thinking too much because he's been out for so long.
Right.
He's been healthy and active for so long. I think he's trying to
Make up
justify.
for it.
Yeah. I mean, that smacked of that to me. So they've got to get him to calm down. I mean, some of that's coaching, some of that's maybe just not anticipating his lack of professionalism for how young he is,
Right. We haven't seen Tommy Lee Lewis in a while either.
No.
And he looked like he may be a guy that could be a spark back there. I mean, that's the thing. You're looking for maybe Hightower to be back there just to catch the ball and have a touchback, or you're putting Jarvis Byrd out there. You're giving up. Yeah. And throughout Peyton's tenure, he always had a prolific guy back there that you had to account for. You go Reggie Bush. You could talk about a lot of guys that return punts and kicks for him. There were guys that you had to be able to look. You were trying to kick the ball out of bounds. You were trying to kick the ball in the end zone. He's kind of given up on that this season.
Yeah, Tommy Lee Lewis was a guy that, and I remember the first time I saw him back in the summer, I thought he was going to be really special and make some plays. And he had the good return against Carolina the first game here. He didn't score, but it was 40, 50-something yards, a really good return. And I think he's a guy that you give him chances, and I think he'll break one eventually. And they just haven't went to him anymore. And I think it's kind of come back to bite him on special teams.
And also not technically sound. I mean, again, the first thing you got to do is be able to block on extra points and kicks. Right. And when opposing coaches can out-scheme you. And that's on Greg McMahon, when they can out-scheme you and beat you outside of the three-step kicker and everything else we've seen right there. What Denver did in terms of holding down your center, that had to be on film somewhere. Okay, the situation with the Giants, they said they saw this on film. They knew that they could collapse that side of the offensive line. That comes back to schematics, and that comes back again to coaching. At this point, and Greg McMahon's been beloved. He's one of the original guys from 06. Peyton is a guy that will stick with his guys through thick and thin. We've seen that with Joe Vitt. And I just think it's interesting on, what can Kevin O'Day really do in 6 weeks coming in here to New Orleans? I think that's more of a panacea, PR move for the fan base, maybe for the media, than to really think that this guy can change things in a 6-week period, especially a guy that's a three-step kicker. If you want to work on this three-step kicker, that's got to be done in the offseason. That can't be done in season.
Yeah, I think it's the way Peyton looks at it is that he's not willing to. He's got too much with McMahon to give up on him now. They've had too many good things happen over the years, and he doesn't want to let this one bad season during the season affect it. But he does want to do something. And in a way, I mean, it's a wake-up call for McMahon, for him having to hire an extra coach. I mean, that's not massaging the ego by any stretch of the imagination. So it's almost, but it could, you know, it kind of made me think of when Dennis Allen was hired as a senior
It made me think exactly
assistant, and then, you know, and now it's a little bit of confusing hierarchy, and you know, in terms of who's in charge of the defense and maybe who's in charge of special teams. We'll see, but
Only difference is McMahon is one of the guys,
Yeah.
and obviously Ryan was not.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
And Allen was one of the guys going back
Yeah.
to the Super Bowl.
And he's done a great job, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Would everybody agree that he has done a fabulous job with this defense? I mean, you can criticize him, for the final play against, was it Denver? Or was it last week? Was it when he did not blitz? But for the most part, Allen has done a great job with again, a defense that's been often injured.
Yeah, I mean, they were really bad the first 3 weeks, but they've looked very aggressive lately, and they kind of controlled a lot of the game against Carolina. Again, like Cam Newton really had 2 good completions. The indefensible throw at the end of the first half to the back of the end zone,
Right.
which of course was set up by the block kick, 10-point swing right there, and also a 10-point swing in the Giants game. I mean, you had 2 games where you lost by 3 and you had a 10-point swing play. And then, of course, the third down throw he made over the middle to Benjamin.
Right,
was it?
and that's
at the
what
end.
I'm speaking of about against Carolina.
Yeah.
Where a lot of
That
people thought maybe he should have went all out and blitzed, knowing that Benjamin was probably going to be the target. He was going to throw it up. But
Yeah.
I mean,
But that was a good throw, good catch. I mean, but other than those plays, I mean, the defense was pretty much in command of that game, and so they've come a long, long way.
And you can credit the just getting some of the guys healthy. I mean, Sheldon Rankin's coming back healthy. You know, Ellaby's playing really, really well right now at linebacker, and obviously, Devin Brough came back a couple of weeks ago, and they looked good that game as well. So, I mean, I think once you get all these guys together, I mean, you can really see how good this defense could possibly be, and they've definitely improved.
Right. I think we've seen it now. I think with Rankins coming back, with Brough, although I think last week was a precautionary measure, not playing him against Carolina because look, let's face it. He wasn't the same guy against Denver. I mean, he's going against Thomas, who's one of the more physical receivers in the NFL. And when you go back and you look at it, you see he's kind of playing on one leg. You probably didn't want to rush him back against Carolina, which was fine because, again, Sterling Moore's come in and played well, and Crawley is growing leaps and bounds as a quarterback. You can look at him again against Carolina, just his opportunity to get on the field. He's consistently stuck with the receiver. I think once he gets to in the weight room, gets a little stronger, learns a little bit more about the NFL game, I think he can be a fine cornerback. But just schematically, you got to like what Allen has done. And these guys have played well. The last few weeks, they have played well. Pressure on the passer for the most part, even though maybe those pressures didn't turn into sacks. And Robinson and Ellaby at linebacker have given them an athletic set at linebackers that they haven't had in New Orleans in a long time.
Yeah, they have, and it's just a credit to the job he's done on it with that unit. And there were times when, in years past, we cringed to see the defense come on the field, and now it's the special teams, and the defense is having to bail the special teams out. We saw it last week against Carolina. They missed a field goal, and Vaccaro runs into the kick, and the defense comes back out and bails them out, and they had to settle for a field goal again. So that spoke volume for how well this defense is playing.
What could you add?
Well, I would just say we'll have to see what happens. Speaking of Vaccaro, if he ends up getting suspended.
Any word, guys? I mean, normally by now you'd probably know at the taping of this program. We probably would have known by now.
Yeah.
I just wonder what that situation is. And gosh, if this team is to climb back into contention, how horrible would it be to be missing probably with a guy that I think has been the MVP for the defense this year?
Yeah, he's a very versatile player, and he's been very athletic and very aggressive. Made a lot of good plays, except for that, running into the kicker. But they made up for it. They still held him to a field goal, and that was kind of a new assignment for Vaccaro. He was saying, might have been an excuse, but he was basically saying that he's only recently been asked to try and block kicks, and he took a bad angle. So,
Yes.
But yeah, I think they allowed something like 231 yards to Carolina, where they were allowing 400 yards a game in the beginning of the year. I know Carolina struggled a little bit. But they're definitely showing progress there. The offense is mostly fine if they don't turn the ball over. And yeah, I mean, this is definitely a team that could have a lot better record than it has right now. And that's, I guess, what gives you hope that they could stack a few wins. You know, maybe they needed 10 days off to kind of, and 10 days off in a home game against a struggling opponent to kind of get rolling again.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see because, again, we have seen such a turnover on the defense with personnel, but we haven't really seen that on the offensive side. What was thought to be probably the weakest part of this team in the preseason and in training camp, and look, I'm on the record. You guys watch this program on a weekly basis, listen to my radio show. I didn't have much faith in this offensive line. I've said before that you look at the way they're playing right now, the move of Pete to the left side, whether it's a tackle or guard, has worked. Jari Evans was a godsend for this team because all of a sudden he solidifies the right side, and we know that the center position is manned by one of the best in the league. So the offensive line has been steady. This receiving core has come on. Maybe a little different than what we've seen from receiving cores in the past, but you got to like what you're seeing on the receiving core. And now a physical running game. There's something that was more a finesse running game in the past with Sean Payton. You got a physical running game now.
Yeah, I think the offensive line is probably the most impressive unit, especially considering what we saw the first few weeks of the season. We were like really worried about this unit, and all of a sudden it seemed like the light just came on and they really started to click and, been able to run the ball a little better, and they've given Breeze time to throw for the most part, and that's something that you want to see.
Right, more time. I think more time than he really believes he has at times. Sometimes he's trying to get rid of the ball a little bit quicker, and if you really watch, you see that he's got a little bit more time than maybe he thinks he has, and I think that's going to come with trust down the line here. But Pete's been impressive since he's been moved to the left side. Look, he's been asked to go to the left guard, play that position, which he's done well, especially in the running game. And then with Teron Armstead being often injured now this year, playing on one leg, he's had to play that left tackle position. He's played against some prolific pass rushers and held his own.
Yeah, well, his teammates have said all along, not just his coaches, but, you talk to his teammates, even on the golf course or in the locker room, off to the side, and they're like, look, his size, weight, talent, athleticism off the charts. It's just a matter of how long it takes him to get it, and not just get it in terms of technique and matching guys on the field, but how to approach the job 24/7, year-round, whatever. And maybe he's coming around, but his talent is definitely helping him bridge the gap while he matures.
And they didn't help him. I mean, moving him from position to position, having him on the right side, right tackle, right guard, left guard, moving him around, that didn't help his maturation process.
Not at all. I mean, it's hard to, you go from, everything's in reverse, and it's hard for a guy to adjust to, especially in the NFL. So I think he's finally coming along and starting to get it all now. And another thing about the Saints, I want to just kind of mention this. They're 4-6 right now, but you look at the schedule right now. It's set up for them to be able to finally string some wins together with, they got the Rams, the Lions, and the Buccaneers coming up. And you look at the Falcons, they have Arizona and Kansas City coming up. So these next few weeks are very critical for this team to be able to make a run.
I agree. Do they have to run the table, do you think, to be able to catch the Falcons and maybe win the division? Do they have to run the table to even be in the mix for a wild card at the end of the season? What do you think has to happen?
I don't think it's a wild. I don't think the wild card team will come out of that division.
I think it's out.
I think you have to win this division to get in, and I think you have to catch the Falcons. I don't think you have to run the table, but I think 5-1 is probably more what they probably need to do to catch them.
Wild card's a long shot, but I would not rule it out because of how many teams I have seen implode at the end of the year, and sometimes all it takes is the wrong guy getting hurt at the wrong time. I mean, it looks like the Giants are going to be a wild card team, but they could easily, do the opposite of what they did the year they won the Super Bowl when it looked like they had no chance to make the playoffs and then made it, I mean, but a team like that, it looks a lot of their wins have been pretty tenuous. So, they've almost been like the antithesis to the Saints. The Giants is the team I look at where it's like they've won a lot of close games and stuff. So, if one of these teams fades, has a critical injury, and the Saints have already won 4 out of 5, so if they win 4 out of 5 again, and they go into the last week of the season 8-7, then I think that at least puts them in position to have a meaningful game at Atlanta. But we'll see.
Last game in the Georgia Dome, by the way, which will be a big game for, obviously, the Falcons. I'll switch gears to the Pelicans. Pelicans showing a little bit of life right now. Again, they've constructed this team with a lot of guys that were backups from other teams. But Drew Holiday has come in. I think he's injected a little bit of life. I know that Anthony Davis's trust factor with Drew Holiday is huge. You can see it already on the court. What do you make of these Pelicans right now? Still kind of in a transition, hoping they can get Tyreke Evans back in a few weeks, whether that is to have him back to be able to play on this team or to showcase him, to be able to move him by the trading deadline, to bring in other assets. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Tyreke. But your thoughts on teams playing fairly well these last few games?
I think the addition of Drew definitely helps. You look at their schedule. I mean, they have some. The loss to Milwaukee at home was a bad loss. The loss to Denver at home was a bad loss, and how bad they lost to the Lakers was bad. But they also lost to Golden State twice and the Spurs once. I mean, those are, those games they're probably going to lose with Drew or without Drew. But I think what we're seeing now is this team starting to kind of find itself, especially with Drew. He seems to be sort of kind of a little piece of glue for this team to kind of bring it all together. And they're only like 2 or 3 games out of the 8th spot in the West. I think it's too early to judge right now.
So when you change a lot of guys in basketball, I think one of the areas where you're always lagging at the beginning of the year is defense, because it requires so much trust and chemistry and understanding in terms of making the rotations on time. And they did switch up. I mean, they've got a lot of new guys in this roster.
No, they turned it over.
And so they not only turned over the roster, but then they had key guys out. So I think, Holiday is supposedly as healthy as he's ever been. And he was, the last time he was this healthy, he was an Eastern Conference All-Star. So he's a legit player and in a very important position. And AD, I think, really needed help from a guy like that, especially in endgame scenarios, and we've already seen it come into play in the Charlotte victory. They had 7 of their 10 losses to start the year. The NBA does these clutch stats where the clutch time is the last 5 minutes. So if you're down by 5 or less in the last 5 minutes, it's like a clutch scenario. And 7 of their losses were that. Which means that it's not like these years where I've covered the team and they've been terrible, where I'm sitting there and I've got my story done by the beginning of the 4th quarter because they're down by like 15, 20 points and I know how the game's going to end. Right. 7 out of their first 10 losses, I had no idea if they were going to pull it out or not, in the last 5 minutes. And so then all of a sudden they get a key guy back and they win a couple in a row, and we'll see, how they do this week. But I think that it gives you some reason for optimism, especially with Tyreke Evans, I believe, on the brink of coming back.
Right. And, of course, he's non-contact right now at practice. It'll be interesting to see how he comes back after multiple knee surgeries. This is a guy that relied on his athleticism as a big part of his game. I mean, when he was on, he was unstoppable going to the basket. Now, how much that jives with what Alvin Gentry wants in his system, it didn't seem to work last year. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Lance Stevenson had come in and kind of given him that type of play before his injury. And, of course, the mismanagement of the cap, cost them Stevenson as they had to cut. And, look, it's great to see this team playing better. I think we all want them to see this team succeed. But there has to be some accountability from the front office on the way this cap has been managed and the players that have been brought in. If it truly is a rebuilding year, they should have been honest and say, look, it's a rebuilding year. We've got these backup players we're bringing in. We think they're going to be better with extended playing time. But we need to get to the end of this season where we get some cap relief and we can bring in a Robin to the Batman of Anthony Davis. I think the good news is that Anthony Davis this week, interviewed by The Vertical, is really doubled down on his commitment to New Orleans and commitment to be here, despite what has been the whirlwind that's been going on around this franchise.
Yeah, that just kind of watching AD over the years, he doesn't seem like a big market kind of guy. I mean, he seems to genuinely like it here, and I don't know if he's just saying that because he thinks that's what we want to hear or what. But I think he really likes New Orleans, and I think he is committed to the program. But I think eventually that may get old to him,
right.
Say, hey, I need some guys around me that I want to win. I want to get to the playoffs, and getting to the playoffs would definitely would help, I would think, in the next, this year.
Yeah, Chris Paul liked it here too, and said very similar things when he was in a similar stage in his career. If he gets very close to his opt-out year and nothing's changed, I would expect what we're hearing from him to change too. But I do agree. He seems to like New Orleans and maybe understand it even better than Chris did, because although Chris's brother CJ married a local girl, Anthony's agent is from here originally, I think he's a St. Augustine.
St. Augustine graduate. Yes.
Graduate, yeah. So, you know, I'm sure he was able to provide Anthony some insight as to how New Orleans will embrace you if you come at it the right way.
Yeah. I mean, if you tell us you love us, we're going to love you right back.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
And so, you know, I think he knows he has nothing to gain by being a malcontent. He's 23 years old. He's early in a very lucrative extension. And he'll still be in his prime when his contract is up. Now's not the time to go sour on the market or the franchise. So when I see all these other stories, you know, the national media, like, for some reason, like, media outside of New Orleans, I mean, I guess I get it. They just can't stand the fact that Anthony Davis is here.
They want him in a big market.
Yeah. So there's all these stories about how he needs to be traded, or I should be traded, or all these teams trying to trade for him, and they're going to get him eventually because they just feel like it's an inevitability, but it's not. And what Anthony told the Vertical is, in my opinion, virtually the same thing he said at Media Day, which is, I'm kind of old school. I like to win it with the team that I started with, and I like it here.
Right. Quickly, with just about a minute or so left, big Bayou Classic this weekend with again, a lot on the line, right?
Yeah, you know, both teams come in undefeated in SWAC play, and I know the actual SWAC championship is actually next weekend in Houston, but this is pretty much the SWAC championship with Southern and Grambling, and I think Grambling, you talk about Devontae Kincaid, who transferred from Ole Miss, and he's thrown for over 2,100 yards this season, and with Southern, you talk about Willie Quinn, the speedy do-it-all player they have. So it'll be a really good Bayou Classic, one of the best ones in years, just as far as, you know, the resumes that both of those teams bring in here, being undefeated in SWAC play. And Grambling's only loss was to Arizona in a game that, you know, they were up 21-3 at the half. So that tells you how good Grambling is. Right.
Normally it's known for the pageantry. It's a family reunion, so to speak, here in New Orleans. It's been a while since this much has been on the line for this game.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like I said, I think it's the first time they've ever both been undefeated in SWAC play, and stakes are pretty high as far as, you know, the winner gets to go to the SWAC championship game this year.
It's a good game for New Orleans, and it's a good game to have so much on the line as well. No doubt about it. Rod Walker, the Advocate, thanks so much for being with us. Brett Martel, the Associated Press. Certainly appreciate you guys' time tonight. Hope you and your family have a happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Thanks for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE at 10 p.m. Also, you can catch us on Friday night at 9 p.m. That is on Pelican Sports Television. And we are normally live every Thursday night right here on WLAE. Also, you can catch me on the radio, 990 a.m. WGSO. That is weekdays, 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. You can download the TuneIn Radio app, and you can take the show with you anywhere. It's a free download for your smartphone or tablet. Also, you can go to ericasher.com. You can download the podcast. You can also listen live to the show. And remember, all the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports can be seen at ericasher.com as well. Again, special thanks to our guests, Rod Walker, the Advocate, also Brett Martel of the Associated Press, also to the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Kenny Juneau, Naila Jones, Richard King, Philip Williamson, and my director, William Hill. Hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving holiday. We'll see you right back here next week for a live broadcast of Inside New Orleans Sports. That's next Thursday at 6 o'clock. My name is Eric Asher. I'm your host. Have a great week. We'll see you back here next week.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.